We are fast approaching my favourite part of the FF14 new expansion hype cycle, interview season, where Yoshida lets interesting pieces of information slip, either intentionally or accidentally, and gives us a huge insight as to the direction of FF14 in the upcoming expansion. Half of the time, these more granular pieces of information are more interesting to me than big exciting trailers or live letter announcements. Today, we are going to be looking at a brand new interview held between Naoki Yoshida and Famitsu in the lead up to both patch 7.5 live letter tomorrow and the first fan festival in North America next week. And trust me, this one is a good one. As a quick note, if you want to support discussions about FF14, please do consider subscribing, as it really does help me out. If you want to check out the interview for yourself, it is linked below in the description, and please do bear in mind that for this video, I used a mixture of machine translation as well as clarification from Japanese speakers on topics that didn't seem 100% clear based off that translator. It might not be 100% perfect, but it's the best we have. I'm not a Japanese speaker, so I can't personally do much better than this. He starts off discussing the patch 7.5 poster. The patch is named Trail to the Heavens and the feelings they were supposed to evoke, as well as the upcoming schedule for future updates. He mentions the upcoming flow of updates, starting with the North American Fan Festival in April, followed by the main scenario part 1 in patch 7.5, which also comes at the end of April, then the European Fan Festival in July, main scenario part 2 in 7.56, and finally the Japanese Fan Fest at the end of October. This sequence of events marks the beginning of what he says is a larger journey. That's why they named it Trail to the Heavens. It's supposed to be building up to something huge. He also hints that players will get a good grasp of the direction the story will be taking heading into patch 8.0 in the near future rather than the far future, my expectation being that it will be made abundantly clear in base 7.5. When the interviewer asks about whether 7.5 will lead more cleanly into 8.0 than Endwalker's 6.5 did, owing in no small part to the culmination of Zero's story, Yoshida notes that this time we've already begun bridging into the next story as early as patch 7.4 with the introduction of characters like Calyx and Halmaret. And in main scenario part 1 of patch 7.5, we're already starting to step into a brand new narrative. He also makes the point that some of the North American Fan Festival announcements will be exciting, stating that there may be announcements that make people go, "You're revealing that much before part 1 even releases?" By intentionally sharing information ahead of time, we want players to speculate on how does it all connect from here. That kind of anticipation is part of the fun of playing an online game in real time. We've prepared a variety of surprises with that in mind. During the conversation, he also mentions the impact that social media can have when it comes to soiling discussions around a game and developing preconceived notions that can affect the player's experience. He says, especially with online games, many players tend to manage their expectations in a negative direction beforehand. In other words, they think, if I don't expect too much, I'll enjoy it more in the end. But nowadays, those lowered expectations often get shared on social media, and that can shape the overall conversation in a negative direction. Even if the actual content ends up exceeding those expectations in a good way, those earlier posts don't disappear. Patch 7.5's Extreme Trial is set to be Inuo, a hidden super boss in the ported versions of Final Fantasy V, and whilst that took many for a loop who may have been expecting someone else entirely, Yoshida talks a big game about what we can anticipate when it releases. Compared to recent trends, I think it leans quite heavily towards being a serious, challenging battle. Rather than focusing on uniqueness, it emphasizes the pure fun of party-based combat, and I personally had a great time during the tuning process. Compared to recent Extreme Trials, it might just be slightly more difficult, but you'll definitely feel a strong sense of progression as you move through the phases. I think it turned out really well, so I hope everyone enjoys tackling it. He also confirms that it will drop 2 totems, but also interestingly is this quote here. That said, starting from 8.0, we're planning to revise various systems, including the concept of totems. With that in mind, we've kept it at 2 drops for now. There are quite a few other aspects that will also change, so this patch may mark kind of an endpoint for many of the current systems and structures. Now this is interesting. A bit of a landmark statement really. He confirms once again that FF14's totem system will be changing in 8.0, which he's already alluded to before, and also that this will likely be the last time we see it in its current iteration, but he also confirms that this isn't the only system to receive a revamp. What else could he be talking about, I wonder? Then, they have a long discussion about the final part of the upcoming Final Fantasy XI Collaboration Alliance raid. We'll be getting Windurst this time around as a quick reminder, and it's confirmed that Shantoto will feature presumably as a boss. He's happy to see the uptick in support for Final Fantasy XI since the Alliance raids began releasing, and says they will be attempting to faithfully recreate parts of the game in the climax of this raid series. The interviewer presses him about the lack of inclusion of Bastok, a fan favourite that has seemingly been missed in favour of other options. He says that, given that the Alliance raid series consists of 3 parts, we've also seen people say, wouldn't it have made sense to simply match them to the 3 nations of FF11, the Kingdom of Sandoria, the Republic of Bastok, and the Federation of Windurst? But if we had done that, it would have made it too easy to predict what was coming next, which would lessen the sense of anticipation. That's one reason why the first installment focused on Juno, the area you reach after leaving the 3 nations in FF11. For this, the third walk, we wanted to go a bit deeper, reaching into the core parts of the FF11 storyline and even the aspects connected to its deeper lore. So this installment is fairly bold in scope, including not just the field content, but also the bosses that appear. We're putting a great deal of effort into making this the true climax. From boss selection to presentation and visual effects, everything is being crafted with great care. During development, we also had Mr. Fujito, who is the FF11 director and producer, review the content with us, and he quietly said, "You're recreating it to this extent?" As I've mentioned before, this is being developed through close collaboration between the FF11 and FF14 teams, so we hope players look forward to it. Attention is then turned to Ultimate. He firstly confirms that this time around it will not be a Four Lords Ultimate, shocking absolutely nobody after the interviewer takes a wild guess, and confirms again that the Ultimate is mostly finished and is in the final tuning stages right now, and thus won't be delayed. It'll be fully revealed at the NA FanFest. They will show footage at that FanFest. He also states, assumingly targeting those that predict it to follow the sequence of MSQ or raid-based ultimates, once it's announced, you might think, oh, so that's what it was. Ultimate raids have always been quite varied, so I'd recommend not getting too locked into recent patterns when guessing. It could still definitely be like an ASEAN-themed ultimate based on what he said for the Copas out there. My guess is what he's referring to is that they may not be limiting themselves to just a single piece of content this time around when making it, and that instead, they will just pull components that they feel fit together to create a cohesive fight under the theming they want. Moving over to Occult Crescent, he confirms that 8 phantom jobs will be added and that Necromancer especially is non-standard in how it plays. He states that the core concept of exploration type content is a unique leveling system where you can do all kinds of wild things within that island alone. The Northern Expedition follows that same foundation, so the core gameplay doesn't change. What makes it appealing is the fun of what you can do with support jobs, and we've designed it so that every added support job feels enjoyable to use. Of course, based on feedback from the previous version, we've also incorporated improvements to the overall feel and usability into the Northern Expedition. He mentions the endgame large-scale raid at the end too, the new iteration of the Forked Tower, which this time around has 2 difficulties. Since there is a normal difficulty this time, the hard version has been set a bit more difficult than the previous one. We encourage players to develop their support jobs and gear up to deal high damage before attempting it. On the other hand, the normal version is essentially designed to be clearable as a part of the quest requirements. It can be completed even without a full alliance, and depending on your support job development, it may even be possible solo. Regardless of party size, even if your support jobs are not fully maxed, we believe it can still be enjoyed without issue. Both the normal and hard versions have a system where boss HP scales depending on the number of players entering. The normal version also includes mechanics you've likely never seen before, but there are no resurrection restrictions. We hope players can approach it casually on their first attempt, wiping and reviving repeatedly while enjoying the experience together. As for hard mode, including the structure of the route, it is balanced around requiring at least 12 players to clear. Since there are also growth systems tied to gear in this content, we encourage players to fully develop their support jobs and equipment to make progression easier. One important note is that we avoided making the maps different between normal and hard, as that would create a mismatch in experience. However, hard mode does include exclusive routes and puzzles that only appear there. Now, they move on to Beastmaster. The interviewer asks about its core appeal and how it differentiates itself from Blue Mage. Yoshida replies, one of the key discussion points within the development team was how many beasts should be available to recruit from the start. Should they be able to fight in public fields, and should there be a growth system for them? Those three elements form the core of our approach to Beastmaster. There is certainly enjoyment in capturing beasts, collecting them and completing a bestiary, which overlaps with Blue Mage's spell collection in some ways. However, with Beastmaster, a major focus is on recruiting monsters you have previously fought, so we placed a lot of emphasis on how that collection process works. Additionally, if the beasts could only be summoned in specific content, it would feel limiting. That's why we've made it possible to summon them in public fields as well, so players can enjoy the feeling of travelling around with those monsters. This is one of the key distinctions from Blue Mage. Naturally, the original monster models and animations were created without any intention of them being accompanied by players. However, if we restricted recruitment only to monsters that already fit certain rules, it would severely limit player choice. So, in preparation for the implementation of Beastmaster, we've also been adjusting and in some cases, rebuilding existing monster assets. This is the set of features we're providing at initial release for Beastmaster, but if we receive feedback like we want to pit trained monsters against each other, there's a possibility we could expand it further. We'd like to evolve it while listening to player feedback. Beastmaster will have a level cap of 50 and there will be 50 monsters available to capture. As the job levels up, the Beastmaster learns actions just like any other job. In the process, they learn 3 whistle actions, and each whistle can be assigned to one of your captured monsters. In battle, you start by fighting alongside the monster assigned to whistle 1, then switch to the monster from whistle 2 to change your combo routes. If an enemy uses interruptible attacks, you can assign monsters with interruptibilities and swap them via whistles when you see a cast bar. The whistles themselves have recast timers, and you can deal more damage by chaining monster finishing moves after swapping them out. However, if you don't manage your rotation efficiently, you'll end up waiting on cooldowns, so timing management becomes important as well. There are also synergy techniques, where you combine skills between yourself and your monsters. By using certain elemental attacks at the end of these chains, you can trigger even more powerful attacks. Depending on the monsters you summon, your rotation changes, which is a part of the fun. In terms of access to content, you can think of it exactly like Blue Mage. With unrestricted party settings or duty finder workarounds, you can challenge a wide range of content. Blue Mage was about using wildly unconventional actions, but Beastmaster is more of a straightforward, orthodox fighting style in comparison. He also mentioned the roguelike mode, which has been teased and people are highly anticipating. It's less a separate piece of content and more something integrated into the job itself. It consists of multiple stages which you progress through as part of the job quests, eventually leading to a final boss in the story. After clearing it, you unlock hard difficulty, and after clearing all of that, you can further increase difficulty yourself. There will also be online rankings. Some players will be satisfied with just the job story, while others will want to go all in on mastery, so we've included a lot of depth. There are also passive items and food that only work inside the roguelike mode. During challenges, neither the Beastmaster nor their monsters naturally recover health, so you'll need to choose which beasts to rest at tents, manage consumables carefully, and decide when to use buffs or items to push through difficult sections. It's designed as a system where you make full use of your available monsters, shops, tents, and passive items on the board to clear the entire run. It is strictly solo content, so it is fundamentally designed as a solo-focused limited job. However, you can still take Beastmaster into existing content with parties, so it's not restricted only to solo play. Some monsters are found in dungeons, so you can go in together to capture them, or you can do it solo. Quest rewards and difficult solo content can also grant access to powerful monster summons. All 50 monsters added in this update can be obtained without needing a party. Some monsters may be faster to capture with a party, but solo players can still obtain everything. We want people to choose how they enjoy it freely. Then, he turns his attention to scheduling. And this, I think, is probably the most interesting part of the entire interview. Starting from patch 7.51 onwards, we have a variety of content planned. Ultimate raids, the Beastmaster job, the concluding chapter of Cosmic Exploration, Hildebrand, and even an unannounced Gold Saucer feature. As for the exact breakdown of which content arrives in which patch, we'll be revealing that at the Fan Festival. There are actually still a few pieces of 7.5x information we haven't been able to reveal yet from the previous live letter, and we'll be announcing all of that together along with the detailed release schedule for each piece of content. So please bear with us a little while longer. For this Fan Festival keynote, we want to create a slightly different atmosphere than usual. We're planning to talk more about the future of Final Fantasy XIV, going into what lies ahead. Regardless of expansions, we intend to lay out everything we are envisioning for the future of the game. Then, we'll go in deeper detail about those topics in the European and later fan festivals. You might normally expect the first fan festival to focus mainly on revealing the next expansion, but this time, it won't stop there. We'll be announcing even larger story developments and systems. We absolutely intend to satisfy what people expect from a fan festival, but there will be more beyond that. That said, the keynote alone will contain so much information that if we tried to explain everything on the spot, it would take around 5 hours. So we'll present the overall direction and key concepts in North America, then deepen the details in Europe and Japan. More than that, this time we really want people to watch the entire presentation, rather than just picking up fragments of announcements. To support that, we're also planning to include actual in-game demonstrations of certain systems. Since the keynote alone would become too long, we're delegating some of the detailed explanations to the development panel, where we plan to use the actual game build. However, it's still actively in development, so things like the UI still show debug elements. It will be much rougher than previous live demos, but having something that actually moves helps make things clearer, and since it's a fan festival, we want to show as much as we can. I've been saying this since the days of 1.0, but I believe MMORPGs are games where you play the present whilst anticipating the future. This time we want to raise expectations for that future as much as possible, so that players can look forward to it while continuing to enjoy the game in the present. The A Realm Reborn reboot was a complete rebuild from the client up, so compared to that, I don't want to describe this as a second reboot. However, in terms of feeling, there may be some similarities. So, for patch 7.5 and the 7.5 series overall, I think of it as an update where you play the present whilst looking forward to the future. We'll be releasing a lot of content in stages, so I hope players can enjoy the game as usual, while also getting excited for what's coming next. All I can really say is, colour me intrigued. He is talking a big game right now. Sweeping changes, one of, if not the biggest single patch in terms of content density in the game's history, and a sequence of announcements and launches over the next couple of months that should keep everybody satiated, assuming you're going to try each piece of content out. I suppose we're not going to have to wait long. Live letter tomorrow, FanFest next week, and by then, we'll have an idea of what we can expect for the future landscape of the game.